In this full course, I'm about to show you my top 10 most important photo editing techniques that I use daily to illustrate my stories. This is my most requested video, and for good reason. Photo editing is a game changer for us story creators, especially when working with AI images. Thanks to AI, I can generate unlimited graphics, which I've used to create stories across various mediums, all for a very low cost and completed faster than I've ever imagined. But if you've worked on AI-powered storytelling in any form, you'd know that stitching a bunch of AI images together is far from enough. Your story needs to be visually appealing, and more importantly, cohesive. How to remove imperfections, make the colors consistent, harmonize lighting and shadows. These are some of the post-processing techniques that can turn your creation from average to premium. And I'll be teaching you all of them in a minute. But first, let's talk about the software you'll need. You have two options to choose from. Photoshop is the industry standard and highly recommended if it's within your budget. Otherwise, Photopea offers a solid free alternative. Being web-based, it requires no installation. More importantly, it replicates nearly all the essential functions of Photoshop with a very similar interface, including the icons and their placement. I'll use Photoshop for the demonstration, but you can perform most of the same steps in Photopea. These photo editing skills have allowed me to create comics and children's books to a high standard, even if I can't draw. Now, this course is geared towards beginners to intermediate users. If you're a graphic design expert, you may already be familiar with many of these techniques. However, if you've never worked on photo editing software before, don't worry. Simply watch any of these introductory videos and you'll be set. I'll put a link in the description. As for everyone else, you should be able to follow along easily. This mini course serves as one segment of an extensive multi-part course on AI-powered storytelling. Although this was initially planned as the 7th or 8th video, I released it first because popular demand dictated it. I designed this video to be watched from start to finish, as each lesson builds on the previous one. Plus, you'll get the full benefits at the end. Enjoy! Sometimes there are unwanted elements in an image that you want to remove. Maybe because it's a distraction, or you're just trying to correct mistakes. Especially when dealing with AI-generated images, it's not uncommon to find some. To remove objects, you only need 3 tools: spot healing brush, remove, and eraser. Photopea doesn't have the remove tool, but the spot healing brush can do almost the same. Use the eraser for the most basic removals, especially if the subject has no background. We'll remove the rest of the bat in another example. Let's move on to the remove tool. The spot healing brush in Photopea works similarly. The trick is to do it gradually. If you do it all at once, chances are the removal won't be as clean. Now it looks pretty good, but we can still retouch it further using the spot healing brush. All done. Now let's remove this guy from this background. You can either use the remove or spot healing brush tool. Don't forget the shadows. You can remove other background elements too. The spot healing brush is better for cleaning up. This character has a Japanese name tag when he's not working in Japan. Luckily, removal's too easy. The other name tag shouldn't be there in the first place. Last demo. To recap, use remove for removal and spot healing brush for cleaning up. Shadows could mean the difference between a perfect blend between a character and background and this. Without them, your subject looks like they're floating, and the overall composition appears dissonant. So how do we properly add shadows? A useful exercise is the use of flashlight on various objects. Understanding the behavior of light as it passes through various shapes is crucial for creating realistic shadows. The most important thing is to identify the light source and direction, as these two significantly influence how shadows are cast in your composition. First demo, I'm going to show you how to create a simple shadow. Lighting is coming from the left, so the shadow should go to the right-ish. Create a new layer by clicking this. Then name it appropriately. Select the lasso. By the way, Photopea has this exact tool if you like it free. And just draw them as you see fit. Don't worry about mistakes because you can easily correct them. Just hold down the shift to add to the selection, or Alt to remove parts of it. You'll see a plus or minus icon in the cursor depending on what button you're pressing. Next, click on the Paint Bucket tool. Choose the color, preferably a darker shade of the subject. In this case, I'm choosing a very dark red. Click Ctrl D to exit selection. Make sure you're on the right layer. Move the shadow layer just below the subject. Then go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Set the intensity to around 10 to 30, but it really depends on the type of shadow. Just play around and you'll find the right balance. Then click OK. Next, decrease the opacity to around 50 to 80%. Again, highly dependent on your composition, but you can trust your eyes. Done. With shadow, without. See how the shadow just improved the composition? What about this one? That's right, the light source comes directly from behind. So the shadow wouldn't be visible within the image, but outside. So no need for shadows here. Maybe just darken the character a little bit. Another example. Obviously the light comes from the window, so the shadow direction should be toward the camera. I'm gonna do the same steps earlier, but there's another trick I'd like to show you. Click the Move tool, then click the shadow, press Ctrl T, or Ctrl Shift T if using Photopea, then go to Edit, Transform, and choose Warp. This allows you to shape the shadow further. Just click and drag. It's really fun too. Don't know why, but I like doing this. You can even use the eraser to remove parts, but make sure to select the soft round eraser brush. Now let's do the other guy real quick. Some might think his shadow should be exactly in the same direction as the other guy, but not in this one. Light can bend, and in his case, it appears to be heading straight towards us. Obviously, there are more advanced ways to create shadows, but this one is quick and easy. Done. Lastly, I'd like to demonstrate a technique for creating silhouette-type shadows. This approach is particularly effective when the subject is in close proximity to the surface when the shadow is cast. Start by holding Ctrl or Command while clicking on the subject of your shadow. Create a layer for the shadow and place it below the subject. Select the Paint Bucket tool, choose a dark color, fill in the selection, press Ctrl D. Make sure you're on the shadow layer, not the subject layer. Select the Move tool and then adjust accordingly. You can use the brush tool to paint the remaining parts. Use Gaussian blur and decrease opacity very slightly. AI imagery has come a long way, but it can still produce abominations just like these. Some defects are too severe to fix, but when they're not, you can easily swap out body parts if you have multiple generations of the same character or subject. And this includes fingers, limbs, eyes, head, clothing. Now why would you want to do that? Have you ever generated an image that stands out even when it has imperfections? Like if the image is so good or the pose is just right that if only it didn't have this minor flaw. I get these types of generations all the time. Fortunately, I've found an effective method of fixing them using other generations of the same character or subject. Take this image for instance. I really like this pose, but one hand looks deformed. Although a defect this small can easily be fixed with in-painting, let's assume that it looks worse for demonstration purposes. So I'm gonna use another hand from the same character to replace the defect. I'm just gonna drop it here. Then flip the image by clicking this. Now the two arms are on the same side. Now I'm gonna use the magnetic lasso tool and just trace the body part I want to copy. Mind you, this thing is almost effortless to use. Press enter after fully tracing your body part and it becomes a selection. Right click, layer via copy, and boom, just copy the new arm. We're done with the other image, so delete that. Click the Move tool so you can put the body part in place. You can press Ctrl T to rotate and make adjustments until the anatomy looks visually correct. That should do it. I'm gonna hide the new arm first so I can properly erase the defective one. Make the new arm visible so I can erase certain parts that don't overlap well. like this part. Once done, it's time to merge both layers. We can use the remove tool to eliminate the fingers. Clean it up with the spot healing brush. Then the eraser. Then the spot healing brush again. Done. Good as new. For demo 2, let's try an animal. Those paws don't look uniform, so I'm gonna borrow paws from another generation, which looks much better. I'll be using the lasso tool instead of the magnetic lasso because the cut doesn't even need to be perfect. You'll find out why. Note that since we are dealing with fur instead of clothing and skin, it's so much easier. Notably, the warp is an essential function because it can drastically change the limb's formation. Before you can use the spot healing brush tool properly, you need to merge the layers. Notice how effortlessly the fur blends? I couldn't even tell it was edited. Maybe you can, I don't know. Let's merge the other hand as well. While Photoshop experts might not find this impressive, I was quite amazed to discover how simple and achievable this effect is. Notice how the character in the top right is missing a jacket sleeve. Now I'm gonna copy the sleeve from the image below it. I used the lasso here, but the magnetic lasso would have been a better option. This is old footage, so my skills weren't as developed. Layer via copy. Drag the sleeve here. Now observe how I use the transform function here. And then the warp function to fit the hand into the sleeve. Or is it the other way around? And after merging the two layers, you can blend the sleeve with the rest of his clothing with a spot healing brush. You can improve the composition further by matching the colors, but that's for the color grading tutorial. Demo 3. How to fix defective eyes. One way is just to copy the other eye using either the lasso or magnetic lasso. Right-click layer via copy, then press Ctrl T on the eye. Drag it in place, and then flip it. You can rotate, adjust the size. Oftentimes, it helps to temporarily decrease opacity when erasing parts of a layer. If both eyes have defects, you're gonna have to use eyes from another image or perform in painting. Last demo. I didn't plan to include this initially, but I thought it would be interesting to show you how I edit my characters to hold objects like this baseball bat. Remember what I said about decreasing opacity? Let's use the eraser tool. Return the opacity to 100%. And there you have it. You can change any color of any object, whether it's clothes, eyes, hair, etc. Before I demo, here are the basic steps. Creating a new layer, drawing a selection, whether by using the lasso or magnetic lasso tool, clicking on the adjustment layer, clicking solid color, and lastly, to choose the right blending mode. It's usually color, multiply, or soft light, sometimes something else. This is very intuitive to use, so I encourage you to play around with it. First demo, I'm gonna change this guy's pants to dark red, matching the reference on the right. First, create a new layer. Hold Ctrl while clicking on the subject layer. Choose the lasso tool. Hold the Alt key so we can exclude the other areas. See the minus sign? Our aim is to select only the parts we want to recolor. Choose the adjustment layer, then solid color. Select the desired color. In my case, I'm trying to emulate this color. Then click the blending mode drop down. Choose whatever gives the results you want. In my case, multiply gives the best result. So now it looks kinda the same. If you're unsatisfied with the color, you can always change it anytime. Moving on to eyes. Eyes are simpler to recolor due to their smaller size. Just create a new layer. We'll be using the brush instead of lassos just because it's hard to screw up the eyes. Choose the color you want. In my case, I want green. Then change the blending mode to color. I prefer a soft round brush for eyes. Just paint it all over the eyes. Lastly, you may adjust the opacity as you see fit. Next, let's do hair, which is more challenging. If you can change realistic hair color, you can handle any color alteration. I'll speed through using the lasso tool without focusing on perfection because we have an effective method to fix any spills later. Click on the mask tool. Click Select and Mask under Properties. Select the Refine Edge brush tool and easily remove any spills. This intuitive brush understands exactly what needs to be deleted. Change the output to selection and click OK. Delete it. Go to the adjustment layer and select solid color. Choose the color you want. I want red for this example. Change the blend mode to multiply. Hold down Shift and click on the layer mask and voila! Now, we can still see some excess color, but we can fix that using the brush tool. Remember this, when working with layer masks, black hides while white shows. Another way to say this is that black erases while white repaints. For now, we're gonna go black because we want to erase the excess. Make sure you're on the color fill layer, not the subject layer. We're trying to erase colors, not the hair. Switch to white to repaint some missing reds. You may adjust the opacity. Oftentimes, we want to isolate the subject of an image by removing its background. There are two ways to do that. The quick and easy way is to simply use an online background remover. The manual way is suitable for complex removals. In other words, if the first method doesn't work well enough. Let's start off by removing the white background from this image. There are tons of websites that remove background, but Photoroom produces the cleanest result. Just drag and drop the image. It's not perfect, but the result looks pretty decent, doesn't it? Not bad for a free automated tool. Now what if there are two subjects and you only want to isolate one of them? We can't use Photoroom for this procedure because we can't control what to remove. We can't remove the male character because the tool doesn't recognize it as background. Let's use Photoshop or Photopea instead. Choose the Object Selection tool. This allows you to isolate an object in a photo and make a selection out of it. I'm going to click on the female so I can remove everything else. I'm going to use the lasso to clean up the spills. The tool isn't perfect. Click the Layer Mask tool. Then select and mask in the Properties area. Adjust the parameters as you see fit. Then click OK and you're done. Sometimes you may only want to remove specific parts of the background, not the entire thing. For example, what if you want to keep the ground but just remove the black area? Unfortunately, Photoroom isn't able to handle that. Instead, use the lasso tool and just draw around the area you want to remove. Then click Select and then Grow. This function will expand your current selection by identifying similar colors. You'll likely need to add areas that were excluded. Just hold Shift. Click Grow once more to confirm all desired areas are included. Then create a layer mask. And press Ctrl-I to invert it. For any residual spills, use the Select and Mask option to make precise adjustments. Alternatively, black and white brush works as well. The primary use of the speed effect is to make static images appear like they're rapidly moving. The idea is to create a ghostly trail in the direction opposite to where the subject is headed, toward the bottom right in this case. The first step is to duplicate the subject by dragging it here or pressing Ctrl-J, then drag the new copy below the original. While on the duplicate layer, click Filter, Blur, then Motion Blur. You need to adjust the blur angle to align with the direction of the character's movement, and then set the distance between 50 to 100. Feel free to play around with this. Then create a layer mask and set the color to black to erase specific parts. Use the brush tool to erase the outer edges of the ghost frame. We only want the trails, so we'll remove any unwanted spills from the other direction. Duplicate the ghost frame layer and drag it below the original. and then use the arrow keys to reposition the most recent ghost frame slightly. Dragging it is also an option. Continue duplicating and repositioning the ghost frames downward. Repeat this process until you have 5 to 9 ghost frames or as many as you want. The faster you want the motion perceived, the more ghost frames. Next, adjust the opacity of each frame incrementally. I'll start with the last trail and set the opacity to 10% or somewhere close to 0. The first trail should be nearest to 100. You can tell this isn't exactly a science. I'll set my second trail to around 60. But the goal is to gradually decrease the opacity of each subsequent frame, moving farther along the trail. Next, I'm gonna merge all the ghost frames into one layer by converting them into a smart object. It looks decent, but the trail is a bit too opaque for the composition. I want it to be more transparent. One way to do that is to apply a motion blur on all the frames again. By the way, you can move it around as you please. The last step is to create a layer mask so we can delete the spills. An easier alternative worth mentioning, which I find less suitable, is the use of motion blur in the background. As you can see, it looks awful. Personally, it hurts my eyes. Motion blurring the background works splendidly in animations, but it does not translate well in sequential storytelling. But trailing ghost frames convey motion without eroding the background. Of course, there are other methods of conveying motion, but that's for a future video. Upscaling an image involves enlarging it while maintaining the original quality. It's particularly useful for 1. Displaying on larger screens, and 2. Printing, where a minimum of 300 pixels per inch is essential for clarity. Some graphics appear high-res on screens but become slightly pixelated when printed on paper. Before I show you how to upscale, remember that not all images are good candidates for it. Take this image for instance. On the left is the original, and on the right is the same image upscaled 4 times. Notice the loss of detail in the upscaled image. Not to mention it has slight noise and pixelation. Some images just degrade in some ways when upscaled. It is what it is. The quickest way to upscale images is to use a free online upscaler. I use upscale.media, but free tools usually come and go, so you can just Google free online upscaler and find whatever's available. Just download your image, then drag and drop it to the website. This image has been upscaled 4 times. Looks pretty good. Alternatively, you can use Gigapixel AI, the industry standard. It costs $99, but it does have superior quality outputs, more customization, and supports batch processing. And this split view slider is quite convenient. My advice, save your money for something more useful. I have 2 ways to change the skin color of characters. One is to use a reference color. The other is to lighten or darken its existing skin tone. First, let me demonstrate how to change this guy's skin color to match this one. The reference need not be in the document, but it's just more convenient to have it here. Start by creating a new layer for the subject's skin tone. Rename it for easy reference. Create another layer for the skin color we're emulating. Click the model skin tone layer, and then choose the brush tool. Make sure it's hard round. Hold Alt to toggle the eyedropper tool, and click on the dominant skin color of the subject. Click any blank area, click the reference layer, and copy the skin tone you want to emulate. Then just brush it near the previous color. Make sure there is overlap. Click on the model layer and change the blending mode to subtract. That color is what we need. Select the subject layer, then click Select, Color Range, Skin Tones. Check Detect Faces, adjust the fuzziness, then click OK. Now we have to delete the spills as we only need to change the skin tone. Create a new adjustment layer and then select Solid Color. Use the color picker to copy the overlapping color. Then click OK. Click the adjustment layer, select the blending mode, and choose Color Dodge. And there you have it. Skin tone has successfully been copied. Next, let's demonstrate how to darken or lighten skin. Start out by selecting the adjustment brush tool. Unfortunately, Photopea doesn't have this feature yet. Just paint all over your subject's skin, Don't worry about the spills. You can now play around with the brightness slider, adjust as you see fit. The contrast helps with balancing the color. To erase the spills, simply change the brush color to black and just paint all over the areas. You know by now that the white color also restores. Perspective refers to how an image is seen by the eye, allowing you to create the illusion of depth and cohesion. The principles you learn here are invaluable for AI-powered storytelling, which often involves merging different elements in a scene. I'll demonstrate, but before all that, you need to understand the concept of vanishing points and horizon lines. Essentially, the vanishing point is where straight lines in your image seem to converge in the distance, and it's key to adding realistic depth to your scenes. The horizon line, on the other hand, is the eye level in the image, where the sky meets the ground. Together, they guide where and how you place every element in your composition to ensure it aligns with the viewer's perspective. If you find it hard to follow, don't worry, because it's simpler than you think. You may also watch this video first. It explains the concept very clearly, and come back after. Link is in the description. In this example, we have a lot of straight lines, which help us identify the vanishing point first. Once you identify the vanishing point, you can find the horizon line. Now, do you think the girl in a box aligns well with our perspective? No, because the girl is touching the horizon line. If that were the case, the top part shouldn't be visible from our perspective, like in the diagram. She should be positioned like this instead. Here's another example. As you can see, I know where to put the different elements according to the viewer's perspective. But next, I'm going to show you how to manipulate the elements to match the perspective of your composition. First demo, I'm going to attach the Chase logo to this building. So I'm going to click Edit, Perspective Warp. Click on the logo and align the Perspective Warp tool. Let me try to get it right. It doesn't need to be perfect. Once done, click Warp, and now we can manipulate the object. Merging with the building is easy. Know why? It really helps if the structure you're integrating with has straight lines, as you can easily align the object with it. Press Enter when done. If you want to edit again, just double-click on Perspective Warp in the layer, and we're back to editing. Click Enter if you're done. Next demo, I'll show you how to change the orientation of this building. Let me just merge the logo with the building real quick. Let's choose Perspective Warp again, and place it on each visible side of the building, starting here. You can expand beyond the canvas, no problem. Let's add the warp to this side and just align it properly. Click Warp, and now we can edit the perspective. Press Ctrl Z if you want to undo. Hold down Shift and click on a line to pin both ends. This allows you to do this. You can switch it off by holding Shift again and clicking on the line. Now in this example, you can see that the placement of this desk is off when it needs to be aligned with the room. So my goal is to change the perspective of the desk and the guy sitting near it. This should make the scene more realistic. So first, I use the table as a guide. Now to involve the black guy, I'm gonna drag this up to the side as well. The goal is to create a near-perfect rectangular prism of this subject, or at least a good approximation of it. We're trying to put him in a box so we can manipulate the perspective. Always make use of straight lines as a guide, in my case, the lines of the desk. Click Warp once done. But it's a lot easier if you pin the line by holding down the Shift key and clicking on it. Now we can properly align the desk with the straight lines on the floor. Perfect. Of course, we have to reorient the other sides, making sure that the rectangle matches the perspective of the room. Click Enter and we're done. Color grading is crucial when using AI-generated images for visual storytelling. And it's because these images can vary widely in terms of color consistency across different elements within a scene. At least when I create graphics for one scene, I generate the background, characters, and even other foreground elements separately. And without editing, the visuals usually look incoherent. There are two ways to color grade and color correct a composition. There's the lazy way, and there's the normal way. Notice the colors in this comic panel? They don't match, which makes the scene appear awkward and unrealistic. Let's fix that. First, you need to create a new layer and name it whatever you want. Select the rectangular marquee tool and just cover your entire composition. I'm doing this because the composition is a comic panel, but if your composition is full page, you can skip this step. Next, click on the paint bucket tool. Hold down Alt if you want to copy a color from the composition. In this example, I want to copy a yellow color. So I'm going to click various objects to find the right color. Note that you can manually set the color yourself too. I think this is the yellow color I want. Next, change the blending mode to soft light. Adjust the opacity as you see fit. And we're done. It's not the best method, but it's easy, fast, and good enough most of the time. But the second method produces a more desirable result. Here's how you do it. Click on the subject layer, create a new adjustment layer, choose curves, then click this. Click layers, then the curves icon of your adjustment layer. Click properties to get back here, then click the hamburger icon, it looks like this. Then select auto options. Choose find dark and light colors. Snap neutral midtones need to be unchecked. Next, you need to pick the colors for the shadows, midtones, and highlights. Remember that shadows are dark, highlights are bright, and midtones are in between. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick the right colors for all three from the background image. I like this method better. And there you go. The background and foreground are now in perfect harmony. I hope you found this video helpful, and since you watched till the end, I'd like to reward you with a cheat sheet for this mini course. This is a PDF that can be utilized as a quick reference for all the methods we've discussed. I'll also add a couple of PSD files so you can open and play around with some of the examples I've used for the demos. And finally, a bonus lesson that didn't make it to the video. You can access it simply by joining my Discord community of AI-powered story creators, and then download it from the official resources channel. Again, all links are in the description, but frankly, these are merely bonuses. The real benefit is being a member of a pioneering community of AI-powered storytellers who you could network with, share some ideas, and maybe seek advice. I also hang around there in my spare time, so maybe you'd like to reach out. Thank you so much for watching, and I recommend you watch the next lesson after this one. See ya!